shot than you. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a one-off book review of The Forever King by Ben Galley. This is a fantasy novel. It's epic, semi-dark fantasy. It came out in 2020. So this is a novel that does not feel 600 pages long. It's this enchanting, exciting, action-filled story with an interesting world and fun characters. It's honestly a testament to self-publishing. This book is fantastic. So the story follows, I'm just going to read the blurb because it is kind of hard to kind of wrap up. So Mithrid Fen wants nothing to do with magic. Magic is a curse word banned by the vast Arca Empire and punishable by death. Its purging has finally brought peace to war-torn Emaneska. Only a stubborn rebellion led by the warlord Outlaw King raids and pillages the Empire's northern fringes. To Cliff Brett Mithrid, this is an age of tranquility and childhood games. That is until an illegal spellbook washes up on her shores and she finds herself thrust into a war she never knew existed. Now hunted by demons and mages, she is dragged exorbitantly north to Sikalusin, and its rebels fighting doggedly to preserve a memory of freedom. Mithrid holds no such ideals. She fights for revenge and nothing nobler. If spilling blood means helping the Outlaw King, then so be it, even if it means all-out war. So, as you know, if you watch my channel, I'm not one that tends to enjoy the descriptive nature of fantasy, but I found that Galley does a great job balancing, the description of the landscapes and all the people and all that stuff with interesting details. I never felt like the scenery or anything was described unnecessarily or for padding, which sometimes that's kind of my issue with this kind of fantasy sometimes. The battle action scenes are executed with absolute finesse. They move quickly, and I enjoyed how the heroes didn't spend time bemoaning they're taking someone's life in mid-fight. They do kind of talk about that later, but they enjoy using their magic and powers and techniques, and I found that realistic. Like, if you've ever fired a gun or shot an arrow, which I have many times, there is a certain kind of coolness, fun factor to doing it. Like, I love shooting. One time, my husband and his cousin and I were shooting skeet at there's a place near where I live. Skeet's hard, all right. I don't know. I think it's hard. It's not like I shoot guns all the time. It's like maybe once a year, and so. Oh, my husband was bothering me. He's like, "You're never gonna hit anything, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, "Oh yeah?" And then the skeets came from two different shooters, I guess. And I hit both of them. Bam, bam! And then his cousin laughed so much at his face. And I was like, "Haha, man. Oh yeah. Better shot than you." Anyway, what was I talking about? Fighting. There are lots of good fights in this book. So, the characters. While the other characters are interesting, Mithrid, the kind of main character, she really stole the show for me. She's like this little firecracker. I think she's 17, 16, so on the edge of, being an adult. And she is just a young woman that has absolutely no tolerance for bullshit. Her stubbornness, her bravery, her sheer, audacity made me adore her instantly. And usually I'm not fond of stories featuring teenagers, or I'm like, okay, the teenager can be a secondary character. I don't want a main character teenager. That's why I don't read YA usually. Her sections of the book were engrossing, and it was wonderful to follow her. I kind of wish the whole book followed her all the time. There was a subtle LGBTQ, representation that was nice, a nice surprise too, because this novel, love story subplots are definitely not a thing. So it was kind of nice to kind of see that on the side. We don't get a lot of romance in this book, which is fine. You don't need it. I adored all the fantastical elements. The magic concept was very fun. There's these things called book ships, which are basically just giant ships filled with books. I was like, oh my god, my two favorite things. Oceans and books. I loved the scenes on the book ships so much. I as I said with Mithrid, the whole thing was just her on the book ship. Anyway, there were these demons that were so creepy and gross, but really fascinating. There were Minotaurs. I love Minotaurs. So I love that the main Minotaur in the book was a female Minotaur. So often in fantasy books, where we're given Minotaurs, as a race, not as the Minotaur, like the one from Crete. These are separate concepts if you're not up on Minotaurs. Usually Minotaurs are male, and then there's a few female ones, obviously, to propagate the species, but they don't usually do anything. But no, the main Minotaur in this book, Warbringer, was a woman, and she was fantastic, and I loved that aspect of it. In fact, one of my favorite aspects of the book was how gender was handled. unlike most European-based fantasy, you know, we aren't given a society rooted in patriarchy where we have one or two token women and they're usually like, you know, the princess or the wizardess. You know, they're strong, but, you know, they're like 2 out of 10 characters. This novel presupposes that women are indeed 50% of the population and are just as likely to be warriors, mages, generals, and, you know, blacksmiths as the men, as whatever. And there's, you know, male characters who are shown as parental figures and things like that. Like it was a really... It was a great kind of gender parody in the novel, and I really appreciated it. In fact, you know, aside from one comment by the villain to a woman, sexism doesn't even really seem to exist. And the comment he made wasn't really about women, it was just denigrating sex work. So, I mean, that's not appropriate either, but he's a villain, that's what they do. So no women in this book were sexually assaulted to show how bad the villains are. That is probably my most hated trope in any genre. Nor is, you know, that kind of trauma part of their stories. One character, a minor character, does mention that, but it doesn't, you know, that didn't become like her only quest, you know, like that's another trope that I also don't really like. Anyway, every fantasy writer should take note of this book and how it handles gender because it's fantastic. There are a few things that kept the book from being absolutely perfect for me. Because this takes place in a world from a previous series, I did feel like I was missing something when it came to the older main characters. I was never lost, like, plot-wise. He did a really good job of explaining things. I understood what was going on. I understood the stakes. I understood how the world functioned. But I kind of felt like the new girlfriend to a party where people have known each other for 10 years. You know, while no one was, like, rude or cold to me, you know, all these inside jokes kind of went over my head. So that kind of what it felt like. There was a few instances where I was like, that must be from the previous series. As such, though, Farden, who is the Outlaw King, his story wasn't as impactful to me as it could have been, and I found him a bit too brooding, though because I wasn't really fully fleshed out on his story, I guess, from previous books, his brooding to me, I was kind of like, get over it, man, but I mean, I don't understand his trauma because I wasn't really there, right? I think some of the fates of some characters, too, that lived or died would have meant more to me if I'd read the other trilogy as well, but I mean, honestly, that didn't really take away from the book at all. That's just something that if you really love epic fantasy and you really love this genre, I recommend reading the first series because you probably would you'd probably really like it. Whereas me, I don't read a ton of this, so this one the reason I picked up this book was because I follow Ben Galley on Twitter, because I follow every like indie writer that comes across my page, and he posted something about Minotaurs on a quest, and I was like, did you write this book? And he's like, yeah, here it is. I'm like, well, I'll buy that. So yeah, I'd buy that for $1. It actually wasn't $1. I paid like $5, and yeah, so there you go. I do buy books for more than $1. Still, all this aside, all this, you know, negative stuff, which isn't really negative at all, it's an engrossing, exciting book, and I really look forward to the second one. I think it's coming out in like October. I probably won't get to it till like next year. But still, I highly recommend it to those who like, you know, darker epic fantasy with lots of battles, you know, really fun characters, an amazing amount of gender parity, and a really rich fantasy world. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was amazing. So yeah, check out Ben's other stuff. I'm calling him Ben. We're friends now. No, we're not. Sorry, Ben. He's Canadian like me, though, so there's that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you've read this book, let me know in the comments, and thanks.